Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Between Friends. I'm Ashley Jones from Designs and Machine Embroidery, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I am here filling in for Eileen. She is visiting her beautiful granddaughter. So she'll be back with you in 2 weeks. So today we have a really awesome technical topic for you. One of my favorite things, because I love knowing the technical reasons that our products work so well, because that helps me decide the right product, the right tool, because that's kind of how I understand. So we have an exciting program with you today. And because it's technical, then we always have Deborah Jones, because she knows all of that technical information. So Deborah, I would love if you would join me on the screen, and let's talk about what we are going to be addressing today. So how are you?
I'm great, Ashley, and I'm, having a lot of. I'm just like you. I have a lot of fun knowing, the why, and so that's a lot of what I think we all wonder when something maybe doesn't go just right. We're like, why did this not, work as I planned? So this is another one of those clue sessions as to things to look for.
I love that, because I do think that it helps you make an educated decision on what to use for your embroidery. And if you're having some sort of challenge, then knowing the whys and the reasons, I think really can help you make that educated decision. You have a term for that. I can't think of it right now when you talk about that. But just using logic to be able to determine what product, what needle, what stabilizer, all of those things, right?
Right, because there's only so many variables, and we do have to use some applied logic to eliminate them or troubleshoot one by one. But the great thing is that we have the ability to put that knowledge to use on our next project.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of us are trying to achieve the same exact thing, and that's the perfect stitch out. And all of these have their place in that perfect stitch out, I think. So, Deborah, we have people joining from all over, as we always do. I love seeing all the familiar names and all the variety of locations. And we've got lots of people. Ann Philback, she's a regular on our Software Success and our Between Friends. We've got Sue Wilson Brown. Thanks for joining, and that's good to see you here. And so many people. Natchitoches, Louisiana. I think that's Natchitoches. So I'm from Alabama. I'm pretty sure that's how we said it. If that's not correct, then let me know. Angela. Welcome, Angela. And so we have people obviously from all over Texas. Deborah, that's in your neck of the woods, because that's where our home office is. Alabama joining us. Thanks for being here. Lots of familiar names. I think, Deborah, everybody's excited to learn about how needles actually affect their embroidery stitch out. What do you think?
Absolutely. And Ashley, it's a fact that many of us use basically the same needle on everything. But I can assure you they make those different sizes and point types for a reason.
Right. I totally agree with you. Well, I say, Deborah, let's get to the point, and let's tell them what they need to know about selecting their needle. We're going to talk about, if it really does matter, what size you use and what type you use, and Deborah's going to go over all of that, and what the numbers mean, numbers and letters. You'll see a variety of numbers and letters on your packaging for your needles, and Deborah's going to go over all of that. So Deborah, I'm going to start with this question that I think that everybody here wants to know probably most. So can your needles affect your embroidery quality? So tell us over in the chat, what do you think the answer to this question is? And then Deborah will give you some details. So Deborah, can your needles affect your embroidery quality?
Well, absolutely. And of course, we all know that changing your needles affects your embroidery quality. We've all seen those symptoms, but many times we only use one point type, and that's a light ballpoint, because most needles sold as embroidery needles are actually light ballpoints, which is a great needle for many, many fabrics, because you can use it on knits as well as many woven fabrics, but not all. For some woven fabrics, we would want to choose a sharp point, but you have to know where to get them, right? Because not all dealers carry the two types. So ballpoint needles have a more rounded point than a sharp point does. The ballpoint's not going to damage your knits because it's designed to spread those fibers and go between them. Whereas there you go. Yeah. So you see that interlocking structure would be damaged if it were cut, Ashley. So a sharp point needle will cut a interlocking yarn, and you can imagine after it's washed a time or two, oh, that yarn, it might look good coming off your machine, but after laundering, you could see little holes around the perimeter of the embroidery. So we want to use sharps only on woven fabrics, Ashley, and I know later you're going to give us a tip on how to tell the difference, what's in the machine. But this is not meant to scare you. It's just meant to inform you that ballpoints are made for knits and sharp points are made for wovens. It's as simple as that.
And that point type really could not only affect the quality of the stitch out, as far as the stitch formation, right, Deborah? But I love this example that you have here on the puckers, because that's also something that we all strive to achieve, as a pucker-free embroidery.
And it can be so frustrating, Ashley. Now, many times we embroiderers automatically think it's my design too dense or my stabilizer is incorrect. But actually, in this case of this Walleye Warrior, the puckered one, which it's not terribly puckered, Ashley, but you can see the puckers around the design, that went away when I embroidered it with a sharp point needle. Because think about this is a synthetic nylon or polyester garment that I embroidered on, and they're tough to start with to penetrate. So a sharper point is going to penetrate more cleanly, but also it is a more slender point. Okay, and that's why it has a smaller footprint than that fatter ballpoint. Makes sense, right, Ashley?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely agree, Deborah, like I think of it like if you're trying to take a, say a ballpoint pen and poke it through your fabric, it's going to push. It may actually penetrate at some point, depending on the fabric you're using. But to me, it pushes on the fabric before it actually will penetrate, which then is going to pull, your fabric from the edges of your hoop and kind of loosen your fabric. Yes, probably not even enough for the naked eye, right? But enough that you do notice it.
It actually depends. Yeah, you're so right. It depends on how big the design is, but absolutely right. It can loosen it in the hoop, let's say, because it's pounding every needle Concentration. Yeah.
Yeah, every time. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's a really good example. And Deborah, when we started carrying these needles years ago, I actually did my own research and I looked up every brand of embroidery needle that I could think of that maybe I'd used some of them in the past, maybe I hadn't. But if you look up, if you're not currently using a dime needle and you look up your brand of needle, then the description of that needle will give you the clue as to what type of needle that is. If it says that it is a light ballpoint, or sometimes it says universal,
Right.
and then that'll kind of tell you that that particular brand of an embroidery needle is a ballpoint. And I agree with you, Deborah. Before we carried them, I had a hard time finding a sharp point embroidery needle. There are sharp point needles out there that we use for sewing, but they weren't embroidery specific. So I love that we have these. And everybody in the chat over there, Deborah, said yes, it can affect the stitch out. So they all knew. We have told
Yay.
them enough that they were they were aware that the right point type really does matter. And
That's
so what about the size, Deborah? So how do you choose the size of the needle? So the point type is based on our fabric, but is the size of the needle, do we choose that based on the fabric as well? Or is that chosen by the thread type that we're using, or maybe a combination of both?
right. Absolutely. Sometimes it's the thread type. If it's a fine yarn, you want a finer blade needle. But as you see on this slide, the 65.9 or 70, the 65.9 or 70 are good for lightweight fabrics like microfiber or moisture wicking materials, and also for fine thread sizes. And a 7511, hey, isn't this the go-to needle for most people for embroidery, Ashley?
I think so, absolutely. I use that more than any other needle. It's my starting point, always.
Yeah. And the 1280 is the next size up, because the bigger the number, the larger the blade, the fatter the blade. Okay. So the 80 is also very popular, especially for sewing. I think for sewing it's super common, but for embroidery as well. The 1385 is a unique size to us because it's great for heavier fabrics like denim and even things knitted with heavier yarns. Sometimes those heavy duty sweatshirts and things like that. And the 9014 is not real commonly used for embroidery, but when you've got webbing, that's a good use for a 14. Embroidery over seams, maybe on a cap. Ashley, the 14 might keep us from having needle deflection, which we're going to see here in a moment. So deflection is what you see shown in that red dotted or dashed line. That's when the needle hits something too heavy and it goes off at a tangent angle, and that's bad because it can strike your needle plate, making a burr on the needle plate, and that can cause thread breaks. And you wouldn't even know why you're getting these mysterious thread breaks. But if the needle hits the inside of your needle hole or your hook, of course, in your bobbin case area, that will make thread breaks. So here you see exactly what can happen when you're stitching over that seam, let's say, as shown in this picture. When the blade's too light, it can actually get forced over into the hook that's rotating underneath your throat plate there. And if you have a heavier blade or the correct blade size, there's not going to be any deflection, therefore no contact with the hook assembly.
I find that very interesting, because I think that, we don't think about that needle being able to bend, like you said, deflecting. We don't think of that. We think of it as a sturdy needle that's not going to bend just because it's entering, a particular fabric or a seam. So I think that's really impressive to see that in an illustration of what could happen. So Deborah, you're saying that not only could it be your needle type, we talked about puckering, but in this case here, just stitch formation in general. If your needle's not the correct size and type, then your machine is fine tuned. It's got a form that perfect stitch with every single time that the needle penetrates. The hook comes around to match up the thread, and so yeah, it's a lot of moving parts. So having the right ingredients is really important.
Right.
So I think that is a great place to answer some questions, Deborah. We've got lots of questions popping up, and then just some comments in general. So Anne Philbeck said, very interesting about the ballpoint. She just learned something. So I always love to hear that. Don't you, Deborah?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Lynn Lone Smith said, can you tell me why some needles, the hole breaks the thread?
Well, it can be a number of reasons. It might not be a large enough hole. The friction, your thread passes through that eye of that needle many times. I forget the number, but something like, the same inch of thread, let's say, goes through back and forth. It's like a saw. It literally saws it in two because it's so much friction. And that can happen just because the eye of the needle is not large enough, or there can occasionally be a needle that is struck wrong, and it's just not, it's a manufacturing defect, but typically it's friction, Lynn.
Right. I like that. That's a good explanation. And then Deborah says, can you tell if you have two needles in front of you out of the package? Can you tell which one is a sharp or a ballpoint needle?
Ashley, I think you got to show them now. Ashley has a great visual on what I recommend to do to tell in the machine, or as you say, out of the package. Go ahead and show them your tip, Ashley.
So once you've got it out of the package, it's nearly impossible to see the difference in the point type. So what Deborah recommends is marking your needles with a Sharpie marker. So you can see I've got a little line across my needles there in two different colors. The blue, I chose blue for ballpoint, B and B. So blue means ballpoint to me, and red means sharp point to me. Now, of course, all of this information on the package here, Deborah's going to talk about what all that means, and that will identify. But if you mark them before you take them out of the package, then whenever you put them in the machine and take them out, you'll know which color it is. So get yourself like a whole bunch of Sharpie markers in different colors, and I've got a tip for you of keeping track of which color designates which type of needle. So we'll see that in a bit. That's actually a really great question and a great tip, Deborah, for marking them, because once they are out of the package, to the naked eye, it's hard. And even the size is printed on the needle or etched or engraved in the needle. But I mean, Deborah, I'm not really sure. You'd have to have some sort of superpower vision to really read that, I think.
Especially for me, my eyes aren't what they once were.
Absolutely. And I love this. So Cindy Bell says, Jones, common last name, but are we related somehow? We are not related, unfortunately, but I do like to think of Deborah as my sister from another mister. So I would say that she's my embroidery sister for sure. And so I wish we were related. I probably would have started embroidering much younger than I did. So
well, we complement each other, Ashley, because we like a lot of the same things, but you've got that IT background, and that is very meaningful to all time. So anyway, I digress. So
yes, and then Cindy Bells that asked if we were related. She also said we're all jonesing for the on the house design. So I love that. I just had to share that. Thank you, Cindy. That cracks me up. I love that. But a few more questions, Deborah, and then we'll get back to it. So Carla Hunter says, so if you're using woven fabric as an applique onto a knit fabric, which needle is better?
Great question. Well, for me, I'm going to choose a ballpoint because, that is the least friendly of those two fabrics. Usually your applique fabric is not going to be one of your, tough nylon synthetics or something like that. So, you're just putting that stitch right on the edge, but the edge is on your knit, and that's the most important
Yeah, and I agree. The knit, you don't want to have a hole in it, so you definitely don't want that sharp point needle. And Jennifer Alexander, who is a frequent flyer at Between Friends and Software Success, she says she uses her embroider's compass to determine what needle size, Deborah. So I
Right.
love that. If you're
Well,
unfamiliar with the embroider's compass, Deborah, tell them what that is quickly.
well, it's a wheel that you can dial to the fabric you're going to be embroidering, and the top window tells you my recommended stabilizer. The middle window tells you my recommended needle point size and blade size. So
Yeah.
it's really got multiple options because, for a lot of fabrics, I give you a couple of choices of
Yeah.
needle types.
And there's a little image like right below me of the embroider's compass, and it is definitely a must-have tool if you don't have it. And also, Marilyn Jones asked if there was a list available if you couldn't remember, and that's what I would say is your list there. And because it does take a little bit of thought, it's not always the same. And Deborah does give you more than one recommendation on the embroider's compass because unfortunately, what we do with a needle and thread and fabric, Deborah, is not always black and white, is it?
Right. And, it is fairly fabric specific, and that's what the compass shows. So,
Yeah. And so I love this comment too from Retha Ranke. She says, drop the mic. Is this what has been causing my puckers all of this time? The wrong needle. I love that.
well, Retha, if you've been troubleshooting all the other variables, maybe so.
Yeah, I love that. And that is exactly what it is. We see a problem, we make a change, we see if that fixes the problem, and then we go on and make more changes and tweaks and things to get that to work. So, and then Donna Hartwich says, I have a certain cotton fabric that often sort of changes color a bit when I am sewing. Is it my needle cutting the fabric?
It could be the needle exposing the color, the actual color of the fabric, but it's under the dye, so to speak, especially depending on how they colored that fabric. It depends on if it's a cotton fabric, it probably wasn't sublimated, but it could have been surface dyed, like basically a screen printing process. And that could have caused it, sure.
Yeah, I love that. That is a very technical answer about the dyes and the fabric. I love that because to me that makes me remember next time I'm doing something. So, Deborah, since we talked about the blade size, the next thing I have on my presentation is kind of a reminder because we talked about your blade size could be determined. You could determine it by fabric or thread. And so this is our Fine Line by Exquisite thread, which is a 60 weight embroidery thread, and it requires a smaller needle. So Deborah, do you want to tell them about that?
Sure. When you've got a fine thread, the groove of the needle is bigger in a bigger blade size. And what the function of the groove is to guide the thread down to the eye. And if you've got a large, wide groove, that thread is just wiggling its way down to the eye. It's not controlled. So you do want to use a finer blade with a finer thread so that on its trip down to the eye, it's just flowing smoothly and not uncontrolled.
Love that. Love that. And we do have a 65 needle that we recommend for use with the micro thread. And one tip that I might offer, Deborah, is that smaller eye is not going to probably work with your machine threaders out there. So
Correct. Right, Ashley.
that's the
Yeah.
tip.
And for that reason, we may not love having to manually thread the smaller eye and the smaller blade needles, which conversely have a smaller eye, even though it's a long eye. But it's worth the effort, but in the result, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I actually have an example I'm going to show them, Deborah, where I stitched a micro font for organizing your needles. And I did use our fine line thread, and my fonts are crystal clear, and I used my 65 needle too. So, and now we've talked about the point type and the size, but how do you identify these things on the packaging? Now we've talked about you can mark them so that when they come out of the package, you can keep track. But in the packaging, there's a lot of numbers and letters on the packaging, Deborah. So will you explain to us what these mean? And we can start with that HAX1. What is that all about?
Well, that's the needle system name. And the system is what determines or what specifies the length of the needle, the position or the distance of the eye from the tip of the needle, a lot of technical specifications for needles of all types, whether it's industrial needles, in our embroidery machine needles. So the HAX1 is the system for our home embroidery needles. And so basically, that's how you know if you're looking at a needle that'll work in your machine. For most of, really all of our tabletop flat shank needles that we use on all the brands, whether they're, Brother, Baby Lock, Janome, they use this system, right, Ashley?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a really good point to know that we've got this on our needle. So we know that we're getting a needle that is perfect for our home embroidery machine. So I love that. And then the next thing on the needle package, there is our size. But Deborah, it's got two numbers, not just one. So tell us what those mean.
Okay, so the 1175, 1280, all of those numbers are just a combination of US and European numbering systems. So, when you go to the shoe store, these sizes, it'll S and it'll say Europe, So this is all this is 11, 12, 90. Those numbers are a system developed by Singer many years ago, and we still use them. And the 75 or 80 or 90 are the European counterpoints to that. So you can use the numbers together or separately. You don't have to worry about it. Just remember, the bigger the number, the fatter the blade size.
Guys, I love that. And the next thing on our packaging here is the EBBR. So Deborah, what does that stand for?
The EBBR is a system, a long eye system that is approved by Brother for use in their multi-needle automatic threading systems. Now, the good thing about it, because it's such a long eye, it's very friendly to those automatic threaders. But the great news is many technicians have told me they love this system for single needle tabletop models as well. It is just a friendlier needle. It's friendlier to all threaders. And we just have to remember, as Ashley noted, we don't want to go down to those 70 10s and 65 9s with automatic threading, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so that is a really good point too on the threading system. I love how our needles are, they work well with these systems. So I know that I'm not going to, hurt anything on my machine by using these. So in that LE, Deborah, you kind of mentioned it a little bit in that previous slide, but that stands for long eye, right?
Correct. And there's a big difference, like this illustration shows, between a sewing needle and an embroidery needle eye. There is a lot larger eye in the embroidery needle, which of course makes it a little weaker needle, Ashley. I mean, it's much easier to break that tip. So that's another reason we use a heavy enough blade size. But generally, we don't see that issue in our normal embroidery, but that is a long eye, and that's what the LE stands for.
And that long eye, Deborah, what does that do for me for embroidery? Why do I want a longer eye?
Well, Ashley, that's a great question. And it's because our embroidery threads are weaker, if you want to think of it that way, than a typical sewing thread, partly because they're finer. Okay. And they're manufactured differently, different twists, different, a softer twist, let's say. And so we are more susceptible to that friction cause thread break and frays. Typically, what we see in a smaller eye aren't clean breaks, they're fray breaks. And we're going to see more about that here shortly.
Oh, that makes sense. Boy, I've seen that fraying. I hate to admit, but I've seen that before for sure. Right. So the next thing on our needle packaging, Deborah, it says SES. So what is SES?
Well, I can't tell you what it stands for, but I can tell you that it means light ballpoint in the case of not just dime needles, but this is a very common signifier of light ballpoints. Of course, as we said, it's needles that are designed for knits or not tightly woven materials. And the unfortunate thing is the sharp needles on our brand, Triumph needles, they don't have any designation there. It's just blank. So if it says SES, that's a light ballpoint. If it is a ballpoint, if it's a ballpoint, it says SES. If it's a sharp, it says nothing there.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so before we talk about coding, we've got some more questions. So let's answer these. And so Marilyn Jones says, I actually won. This isn't a question, but I love this. She said she actually won one of the weekly drawings, Deborah, and the compass was in her bundle. So she'll have to get it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, get it by her machine and start using it regularly. She says she needs to do that. So I definitely agree. It's a world of help. And speaking of that compass, I love this comment from Kelly. So Kelly, I always murder your last name and I apologize for that. But Deborah, you know Kelly too.
Kelly Terrio.
Terrio. Thank you, Terrio. And so Kelly says, I could live for 150 years and still not know as much as Deborah. And Kelly, I totally agree. And I get to work with her and ask her questions every day. And I still couldn't learn all that. And he says, trust what she says. Deborah needs to have a Dime create a live show that's called Because Deborah Says. Yeah. I love that.
Kelly, thank you so much. And honestly, Kelly is extremely knowledgeable. He's too kind.
He is, definitely. So, but I just love that. But I do agree. All that information from your year's experience, it's definitely a lot of fantastic knowledge. So, and then our friend Joanne Banco at Let's Go Sew says, Deborah, do you suggest a slower stitching for finer needles? So what's your take on that?
Joanne, that's a really excellent and thoughtful point because, as I said, those finer needles are weaker, right? So it is not from a couple of standpoints, probably very smart to stitch a little slower with a smaller needle because even though we're possibly using a finer thread, not always. So you're going to make it a kinder, gentler process, let's say, by slowing that machine down. Good point.
That is a good point. So, and then Patsy says, what needle should I use for a 40 weight retro vintage thread?
Ashley, you've used it a lot. Why don't you answer that?
And so that retro vintage thread is Dime's line of polyester embroidery thread that has a matte finish for anybody that's unfamiliar. And it is the same weight as our regular embroidery thread. So I generally use a 7511 as long as it is into a fabric that it's okay to use that 7511. If I'm stitching on something that's a heavier weight, then I might increase my needle size. But in this case, this is the same weight thread as your regular embroidery thread. So your 7511 will work most often. So love that thread. Has a really cool finish and texture to it. And then Cindy Ball says, why doesn't the needle manufacturer keep the eye hole the same size and spot so your threaders work? So Deborah, that
Well,
one's definitely for you.
actually, Cindy, they should within this. You should find it in the same location within a brand. That's why we say use brands of needles, and it's not just the position of the eye that generally is dictated by the system. Remember, but what varies is the location of the ear of the needle. Now, I didn't get into this purposely because I don't want to sound too technical, but the ear of the needle is that little scoop out on the back. And that varies in the length. And so that's what picks up the thread every time the hook comes around. So typically the eye position shouldn't change. The length of it should, but the center of that eye should be in the very same place within a brand. Okay. But the ear location, or not location, but length, which can affect your sewing quality, not necessarily your threading, but that's why once you get your needle, once you get your machine stitching good with a particular brand of needles, then that's what you should use.
I love that. And I learned something today. This is my first lesson on the ear of the needle. So I love that. So we all learn all the time. And then Deborah Tracy Edwards says, so does the EBVR work with regular embroidery machines as well as 10 needles? And I think you did mention that, but do you want to
absolutely, Tracy. It's a superior needle for both. Absolutely.
Yeah. Love that. And then Kirsten Swanson, our friend over at embroidery.com. Thank you for joining, Kirsten. So she says, have you ever run into a knit fabric that shreds even when you have a ballpoint needle?
Kirsten, I'm going to make it short, but I'm going to say yes. I used to do some consulting for one of the big clothing distributors, and they sent me a shirt to test. Everyone was having trouble with it. Okay, so yes, I even had a fabric engineer consultant with me working on this, and we never could solve it, even with the ultra fine point needles that we don't typically use in embroidery. It's nevertheless, it continued to be damaged, I'm going to call it, by the needle penetrations. And so ultimately I deemed that garment not recommended for embroidery. Now, that's very rare. Okay. That's the only time I've run across it in my many years of embroidery. So I'm going to say it is possible that, but not common.
Yeah, that's really a good story there. Who would have ever guessed? So,
Yeah.
And then Joanne's response to your answer on the slower speed for the needle, and she said she'd rather slow down than change a broken needle. And
Joanne, the pain of a broken needle isn't in changing it; it's in the damage it causes your garment potentially.
That's true, because that broken tip keeps going and chews up your item. Yeah, for sure.
You're so right. You are absolutely right. It's painful.
And then Retha Ranke said she missed what size she said is the go-to size. So for me, it's a 75-11. And Deborah, I think you're similar,
absolutely. Right?
Yeah, 75-11.
And also, Ashley, we should say also 90% of us.
Yes, absolutely. And it is definitely the one that I use most. It's always my starting point, unless I have some sort of issue, and then I'm, troubleshooting and then, evaluate the needle that might need to be changed. So, okay. So the next question I have for you, Deborah, and this is something that is definitely, I think, a unique, because some of us are familiar with different coatings on needle, but what should we know about the coating on the needle? There's more than one type of coating, and today we're learning about something that may be new to most all of you, and you're going to love this. It's pretty impressive what the different coatings mean. So Deborah, tell us about the different needle coatings.
Okay, chrome is the coating that's most common. That's what most of us have in our sewing room right now, if not, probably 99% of us, right? But it's very subject to damage. You see the flattened tip on this chrome needle, that happens from just the contact with the fabric, and over 100,000 stitches, that's pretty much, either that or depending on what you're stitching on, we have what's called point attrition, meaning it just wears away and you're not really picking up the thread correctly anymore. So chrome needles have a shorter life than the next two, which are titanium or ceramic. Now, titanium is not common in the home embroidery world, although there are some out there. However, it's and it is a longer lasting needle, but it requires a natural resource. Sometimes they're difficult to find, these titanium coated needles. So we like a different coating, which is ceramic needles.
Oh
And
man,
ceramic coated,
ceramic.
I should say. They're not made out of ceramic, but many of you might be familiar with ceramics in your hair care products and things like that. We have a lot of ceramic coating. Even my dog clippers come in ceramic because they stay cooler. So this is a non-metal coating on the outside of the needle, and it is got a lower penetration force, which that's all very scientific. I don't understand exactly how that works, but the engineers tell us that it is kinder to delicate fabrics, which means a lot to me.
Right.
Maybe it would have worked on that shirt on those
that
years
that
ago.
one garment in the whole world that wasn't embroiderable, right?
Right. Maybe it needed a lower penetration force, seriously. But the good news is it lasts twice as long, at least twice as long, on these tough synthetic fabrics. On regular fabrics, it might last 4 or 5 times longer than a chrome plated needle.
Yeah, I think that's pretty impressive. I'm really enjoying all of this information about the ceramic needles because it was new to me before we started having ceramic needles. So, Deborah, talk about the hardness then of the ceramic needle and this very complicated set of information that I see here.
Well, here we see that poor flattened needle tip again. And, the great thing about ceramic needles is that they are very hard. Now, again, I don't understand the Vickers test. There is a Vickers test that gives these HV ratings on the hardness of the items coated with various coatings. And this Vickers test is very reliable, and it has an extremely high rating on ceramic coated needles. So they will last double to triple, or, depending on what you're sewing. But the good news is they're not a lot more expensive, but they are a lot longer lasting. And of course, we don't usually change our needles until we see symptoms, right, Ashley?
Yeah, and sometimes we don't change it soon enough, even though we might detect a minor symptom, but then we tend to keep going for sure. So, and
Right.
I love the idea of these lasting longer because, like you said, Deborah, we don't change them as often as we probably should. And the sad part of that is that needles are probably the most inexpensive part of our embroidery, and
Right.
so it should be the first thing that I probably look at whenever I'm having an issue and change it without, any question whatsoever. But we tend to, kind of look past that a bit. But this next example here is another great reason to have that ceramic needle. So you're saying it has a slicker surface. So tell us what that means.
Well, the ceramic is absolutely slicker than a chrome needle. It's going to be similar to a titanium needle in slickness. So you're going to get many fewer of those friction related thread breaks, even in a smaller needle. Like one of our viewers mentioned, having a lot of thread breaks in a finer needle. And so therefore you're going to spend less time rethreading those thread breaks and fewer needle changes. So it's a great benefit that they are slicker.
Yeah, and anything we can do to reduce friction is going to help reduce those thread breaks, which none of us want those either. So
Right.
another thing that we deal with. And then here I was interested in this too, that it has less static electricity for the ceramic needles, right?
Right. And so that creates, um, a lot that there's less static, there's less friction, less thread breaks. So again, it's just a benefit of that slicker surface. And this is people are probably thinking, but I've never seen ceramic needles, but they are something common, not super common, but common in the industrial world. Okay.
Right.
So the needles also run cooler, and which is understandable. And why? Because there's less friction. Okay, those two go hand in hand, and they are much less likely to cause synthetic fabrics to reach a melting point, which can happen in this stitching process. So here we see damaged synthetic, and here we see where that melted synthetic ends up. It ends up on your needle. Now, the chrome needle, it will adhere to very easily, but a ceramic needle, it's going to shed that adhesion, those coatings that are going to try to stick to your needle. However, you may think of, well, I've got Teflon needles for that. And there are Teflon coated needles, and they look green. They're kind of funny looking, but unfortunately that green coating is gone very quickly. And it's not nearly as long lasting a benefit as with a ceramic needle.
And since it's slicker, Deborah, does this in any way help us with our adhesive stabilizers?
Oh, Ashley, absolutely. That's a great thought because, anything that can stick to a needle, not just melted synthetic fibers, maybe it's embroidery temporary spray adhesive or adhesive peel and stick or adhesive sew and wash. Sure, there's lots of sticky situations we get into, and the ceramic needle is going to still perform without you having to change it or clean it much longer than a chrome needle.
I love it. That alone is pretty impressive for sure. And these ceramic needles, Deborah, the questions started flying up whenever we started talking about the ceramic needles. And so I'll start with some of these questions. Patricia Davis says that the ceramic needles come in all types and sizes. And so do you want to answer that one?
Well, we started with the two most popular sizes. We started with 7511 and 80 in the blade size, and we have both point types, sharp and ballpoint. So those are the most popular ones. Depending on how those perform, we'll see about adding smaller sizes and going to the 90. But right now, the core sizes are covered.
I love that. And Kirsten Swanson said, thinking of home ceramics like pottery, she would have never thought about it as a coating on a needle. That this is fascinating. I think everybody's really enjoying the ceramic needles, something that I think quite a few people were unaware of. So, and here's a couple more questions. So Cindy Bell says, I thought you were promoting a certain brand, TNC ? So the TNC is what is printed on the top of our needle package. So do you want to talk about that, Deborah?
Well, I'm trying to educate you about needles, okay? What Dime happens to sell Triumph Needle Corporation needles, and we have a exclusive relationship with them in the U.S. market, and that's how we were able to say, hey, can we get some of those super duper ceramic coatings on our needles for our machine, our hobby machines, because they're really beneficial in the commercial world. So we want that too, right, Ashley?
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's exactly what I remember saying whenever you were talking about the ceramic needles for commercial users. I said that very thing, is that we need that for our home users.
Right.
So, because we can all benefit from a needle that is going to make things a little bit better. So, and then Marjorie Hirschberger says, how can you tell if the needle is ceramic? So Deborah, is there any way that we can know if it's out of the packaging, or are you just dependent on the packaging?
Yeah, pretty much you're dependent on the packaging. A titanium needle actually has a goldish looking color. Ceramic needles still look like a regular needle, but Ashley, you know how to show it. And I think you will here in a moment.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then then Deborah says, Bingold says, what is the best manual needle threader when you need it? So maybe she's referring to the smaller needle when you cannot use your automatic threader. So do you have a manual needle threader that you like, Deborah?
Well, no, although that would be good to know, if you've got something that would, push it on through the needle. I tell you, I don't use that method because here's my method to whoever asked that question.
I love this. I thought you might answer that. That was Deborah. So
Yeah,
Deborah
Oh,
Bingle.
okay, Deborah.
Yeah.
So what I do is I put my thread, which is polyester these days, so it's got a little firmness to it, and I put it in the groove of the needle and push down. Because guess where the groove ends up? At
Right
the
at the
eye.
eye.
And so I come from a commercial background originally, and we had to have a quick, easy threading method. And that's it. You just put it in the groove, push down. It goes through 90% of the time right through the eye, and you just grab it from the back. So that's my go-to method. Now, of course, Kelly Terrio, I should say, does have a neat needle holder that helps you insert the needle, which I love. Yeah, here he is, Kelly.
I love it.
And so that is a help when you're changing needles. But as far as threading them, just put it in the groove and push.
I love that. I knew that you would say that because you've said that before. So I love that question. And then you don't have to have a tool either. You don't have to look for a tool when you're doing that threading. So I love that. Okay, so the last thing on our needle identifying the package, Deborah, is we do here at Dime have both chrome and ceramic needles. So I just wanted to share with everyone how they could identify the difference in the chrome needles and the ceramic needles, but it is on the packaging. So Deborah, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. There's a silver band on the pink rib pack, we call it, that indicates that there identifies the ceramic needle versus the chrome needle. So if you have ceramic needles, you might want to follow Ashley's trick and mark them with a certain color Sharpie while they're in the package. Maybe use a green Sharpie or whatever. I think that would be wise.
Yeah, I definitely agree because they don't. I'm looking at my two here in front of me, Deborah, and like visually, you can't tell a difference in the color of the needle. They both look like that same metallic color. So this is my tip for making sure that you organize. So I'm going to show you how to create this needle organizer in the software. Deborah, I know you use our software regularly too, and this is such an easy thing to make. I just stitched mine on felt. And one thing I do recommend is every single time you're done stitching for the day, remove your needle and insert it into this box that coordinates with your needle so that tomorrow when you start stitching, you're going to put in the right needle for the project. So when you're done stitching and you're turning your machine off, pull the needle out too, and then the next day you can put in the correct needle for the project. Because Deborah, we just saw from everything you told us how important it is to choose the needle for the project and not just stay with that blanket, this is my needle that I use every time. So,
and I'm going to brag on Ashley because she has a really cool tip that she didn't mention, but I'm going to mention it. When she leaves her machine, she takes the needle out.
Yeah.
Because she really wants to consciously choose the correct needle the next time she stitches. And who remembers what's in there? I mean, you can mark it and look and see. But what a great idea to just take the needle out. Then you're going to choose wisely.
Right, absolutely. And I just put my needle into a little organizer like this. Now, this particular organizer is just for my embroidery needles. So you can see I've got Dime EMB for my Dime embroidery needles. And then I've got the Sharp ballpoint. And then I just recently did this to add the ceramic Sharp and ballpoint so I could keep track of it. And that color right here is yellow, so it's a little hard to see on the screen. But I also color coded the numbers. And so if I actually want to mark with my colored Sharpie, I just mark the same color as my thread here. So red means sharp to me. That is a regular chrome needle. Blue means ballpoint chrome needle. And then this is orange. And so orange means ceramic sharp to me, and green means ceramic ballpoint. And then I can just keep track of this, and I take it right out of the machine and I put it in one of these little slots. So tomorrow when I start embroidering, I may have several needles in this, and I can then just pull the needle I want that maybe is not worn out yet, but I'm still putting in the right needle for the project. So let me show them, Deborah, in our Perfect Embroidery Pro, how quickly I created this, because there's actually some really fun tools in Perfect Embroidery Pro that actually makes this really quick. So I will do that. Deborah, if you want to read any questions that we might want to answer before we go, that'd be great. So I'm going to start with a line. And in Perfect Embroidery Pro, you can draw an artwork line, or you can draw a run stitch line or a satin stitch. I tend to start with artwork and then convert it. That's just me personally. But look what's happening. I want to draw a straight line. If I push the shift on my keyboard, look, the line actually pops to the position to make it perfectly straight. And then I just click, and now I have one line. I'm going to make that line 5 inches long, and I'm going to repeat it. So I'm going to use our repeat tool here, and I want 1 across, but I want 6 down, and I put a 1/2 inch space between mine. And then I've got perfectly spaced lines here. So just like that, I click apply, add it to the screen. Now I'm going to group this together, and then I'm going to copy it, paste it, rotate it 90 degrees so that I've got my grid. And now I'm going to use my alignment tools to align to the right and to the bottom. Now this is too long for my top numbers, so I'm just going to click and drag that down and just kind of eyeball it the size that I need. So just like that. And now I do like to have a box around the entire thing. It just kind of makes it finished. So this outside line here, I'm going to ungroup both of these so that I can just select this outside line and the bottommost line, and I'm going to combine those. That just tells the software that it's going to see it as one object. And if I turn that a different color and click away, you can see that's what I did there. So now I'm just going to copy paste that, and I'm going to horizontally and vertically mirror that, and it just pops it around to the other side. And then I can actually combine those so that the software sees that as one object. So I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to make that one color. And now here's a tip for Dime software. If you have Perfect Embroidery Pro, under the effects panel, I can convert that to a run stitch. But look at all those jumps everywhere. So under the edit menu, if you do optimize entry and exit, you'll see that it actually puts that in a stitch order where I don't have that. And I'm not really sure why I got that funky line there. And so I'm just going to undo and just select and do that again. And if it remains, and so for whatever reason, the second time around, it didn't do that, which is fine by me. I didn't want it there. And so now I can just add my text. So I just added Dime EMB to let me know that these are my Dime embroidery needles. And I have one of these organizers for sewing needles as well. And I'm just going to copy and paste, and then I can just change the words here. So I change this to sharp, and I change the next one to ballpoint. So if I copy and paste again, I can change that to ballpoint. And then I add my numbers across the top as well. So now these two here, I can copy and paste both of them and just add the ceramic in front of that. When I select that, it comes over here in my text properties. I'm going to do CER for ceramic, works for me. It's, whatever you want on your organizer. So it depends on what you like. And then I did change these and make them different colors. So I did red for sharp, blue for ballpoint. That's just me personally. And then I did orange and green. And these are colors that I own Sharpie markers for so that I could easily keep them straight. So now I'm going to use my distribute, and it will evenly space everything. And then I can write a line over here to my side. And then we just need our numbers. So now the font that I have chosen here is a small font. It's a micro font in our software so that when I'm using these tiny little fonts, they're going to be legible. Now here, let me give you another software tip. You guys know I love software. So instead of copy and paste, I'm going to do a right mouse click and I'm going to say duplicate. And now every time I click, it's going to make a copy for me. So how cool is that, right? And so then I can just go over here and change my number. So I'm going to scoot this to the side. So our largest here at Dime is 90. And then we do have the 85. And now I'm going to put 80 for the ceramic. So I'm going to change this one to my 80. And I know that's a mess, but you guys are going to see me line that up here. And then my 75, just like that. And now if I select all of these numbers, I can hold down my control key or drag a box around them. I can do my distribute option, and you can see it evenly spaces that. And then I can do my bottom or center align to make sure that everything's perfectly placed. And so now I'm ready to stitch this out. Now I turned mine into a little pin cushion type where I stuffed it with polyfill. So in that case, I just stitched this on a piece of felt, and this last run stitch around the edge, I made it about a 1/4 inch away, and I turned that into a run stitch. That's for me to put a piece of fabric on the top, and it'll actually stitch my 2 layers together, right sides together, and I can turn it inside out. And so it's that simple, and you make yourself a little needle organizer so that you always know what needle. So Deborah, what did you think about that?
I think that is really fast and easy to make, and some great friendly tools in that software.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you guys love that. So our special for today is the ceramic coated needles, Deborah. And so this pack of needles, we got our ceramic coated needles in the 2 different sizes, and those are on special. So make sure you check that out over at DZGNS. Get both sizes. So, but if you want to give them a try, get the size you think you would use the most, which, for Deborah and I, we've already said our 7511 we use. And then this month, Deborah, I didn't put the slide in here, but I'm pretty sure this entire month is also Hoopapalooza, right? So yep. We have specials on our Dime Snap Hoops. So which means that if you are combining purchasing the specially priced hoops and maybe your needles, we do have free shipping over $75. So, and those hoops will probably get you there. So if you haven't tried the ceramic needles, make sure you snag these while they're on special. I love that tagline. That's the perfect explanation of what we've already talked about, right, Deborah? Friction resistant, longer lasting, and they are kind to delicate fabrics. So really awesome. So any last things you want to say about these ceramic needles, Deborah, before we go on to the on the house designs?
No, I think we covered it. I think that they certainly are a good thing to have on hand when you have special situations. But I gotta say, now that they're available, they're probably going to be my go-to needle when I'm using those sizes.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So far, I know I'm in love with them. That's for sure. So, okay. So if you liked our presentation today and you want to make sure that you don't miss an episode, make sure that you like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications when we go live. So let's take a look at this video of how you can like us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
In this video, we'll show you how to subscribe to a YouTube channel and follow a Facebook page through your phone. Let's start with YouTube. First, open your YouTube app on your phone. Once you're on your home page, search for the Designs in Machine Embroidery in the search bar at the top of the screen. Click on it and go to the channel page. Once on the channel page, click the subscribe button, and that's it. You're now subscribed to the channel. Now, let's move on to Facebook. First, open your Facebook app. Once on your home page, search for Designs in Machine Embroidery in the search bar at the top of the screen. Once on the profile page, click the 3 dots and select the follow button. And that's it. You're now following the page. Thanks for watching.
And so just a couple of questions popped up about the software demo, so I'll answer those before we go on to our on the house, Deborah. So Marianne says you can leave an opening in the top layer for turning, and yes, you absolutely can. I cheated, Deborah, because I was using felt instead of leaving an opening on the edge of my stitching. I just snipped a hole in the back of my felt because it doesn't fray, and it's just for me to use at my machine, and nobody sees it. So I kind of did a little bit of a shortcut because I have made quite a few of those. And then Kit de Verville says that how does she expect us to remember how to make that needle pillow? Well, the good thing is, Kit, is you can rewatch this live as many times as you like. After the airing, you can rewatch, you can get right to that point, you can pause, you can slow down. It makes it really easy to be able to duplicate that design. And then Janet Rowe, Deborah says, what snap hoop is your favorite, the 4x4 or the 5x7? So do you have a favorite, Deborah?
Well, it really depends, Janet, I think, on which size you use the most in a standard hoop. But I'd have to say I probably use my 5x7 more than any other size in either a standard hoop or a snap hoop.
I agree with you. It seems like our designs, I started embroidering with just a 4x4 hoop years ago. And it seems like, designs these days are definitely made for larger hoops, plus a longer name. That's when I decided I need something bigger than a 4x4, is when a friend asked me to embroider Jacqueline, Deborah, on a towel, because Jacqueline was so small in the 4x4. So
Right.
Jacqueline got me to get a new machine. So, okay, guys. So our On the House, if you are not familiar with On the House, this is a free weekly design. And every month, Eileen makes a project with the free weekly design as well. These are available for limited time. So as we announce them, make sure you go to the site and download them. They're 100% free. At some point, they most likely will go away. So just make sure you get them while they are available. Now, you will get it over at dzgns.com, and we would love it if you would share your project that you made with our On the House designs using hashtags Dime Sew Along, On the House, or Exquisite Thread, and all of them. So that'll allow us to find them on Facebook, and we can share them. In fact, we have a video of some things that you guys have been making. So let's see some of the projects that have been made with our On the House designs. I love that. And this week's On the House design is this adorable bear in this cute little baby buggy. So, Deborah, do you want to talk a little bit more about this design? Because you are the point person in creating these designs. So I know that a lot of work goes into these to create these beautiful embroidery designs. And this design, that frame up above, is for a specific purpose. Do you want to tell everybody about that?
Well, the frame just lets you put in a name or a name and a date, and this design is for a 5x7 hoop, but a lot of that is taken up by the frame. So it's not super high stitch count, but it is really useful. And I think, Ashley, you could use it for the 1 month, 2 month, 3 month Hallmark items. And also, you can leave the frame off if you want it to just be the buggy and the bear. So pretty versatile design. And if you wanted, you could stitch it in pink. But last week's design was a little bunny, and so she was in pink. So we chose the bear for the boys.
I love that. I think that's a great idea and a good point. That's a very versatile design that you could leave the frame off and just have the main body of the design. And all of these designs, Deborah, you select the perfect colors of our exquisite thread for these designs. And I know that there's a lot of colors, it seems like there, but it's really about shading. And that's the beauty of having all of these different colors at your disposal, right? Is to get that perfect shading in your embroidery
Right,
designs like this
right.
one.
And I can tell you that when you've got a face of anything, whether it's a bear or a
Yes.
bunny, whatever it is, it's important to use the right shade, or it can actually destroy the effect or the expression. So that's why I love the fact that we provide the information to get the very same result.
Absolutely. I love that. And sometimes the stitching I enjoy more than picking out the colors. So if somebody just tells me what to use, I get to the fun part. So that's what I
Right.
like. So,
Exactly.
and Deborah, just a couple of comments before we go. Charlotte Turner said, great presentation today. And also, Sandy Caesar says, love these classes. I can learn so many new things. So I just love that. So thank you all for the kind words. I learn every single day from Deborah as well. I just get to see and talk to her more often. And I'm so thankful of that, Deborah. So I appreciate you sharing Facebook Live with me today. And next week, I am going to be on here again with Reen Wilcoxon of Embroidery Gardens. So we will talk about stitching one of her in the hoop bags, and she's got some tips and tricks for you. So you can join me next week on Thursday as well. But Deborah, I so appreciate you being here. I think that everyone loved your information about needles, and I definitely did. I learned something new today too. So I guess until we have another Between Friends, Deborah, I'm going to say bye for now.
Bye, everyone.